Hey, how are you, sir?
Hi, very well. Thank you very much. Couldn't be better. How are you?
Awesome. Oh man, pretty good. Well, looking forward to this. I know that you can't miss a conference. Certainly the conferences that I've been to, and not get a at least one presentation about how to produce or how to ensure quality data. So looking forward to this, and certainly yes, the information about the analytics, if you will. So looking forward to this, and so I guess you can give us a little bit about your background and go right into your presentation.
Let me do that. As you kind of said, there is a lot of kind of talk about how to build analytics practice and whatnot. But before I kind of go into the gory detail, let me first give you a little bit of background on me. I had analytics for a strategy consulting firm called OCNC Strategy Consultants. I've been in the analytics space for the best part of about 25 years, so even when the data was small, so to speak. I've been in consulting for about 20 years, and I kind of do deliver projects as well as help clients build their kind of analytics capability across industries, across kind of functions within the industries. By background, I come from a quant side. I did a PhD and a postdoc in computational physics at Imperial, and have then swapped to kind of commercial side. And I'm also on the advisory board for business analytics at Imperial College. So that's kind of background to me. What I haven't told you yet is that kind of the real credentials for building the analytics practice is from kind of trials and tribulations of me doing it myself in the companies that I've been working in about 3 times. Twice I did not succeed, and the third time we're now 7 odd years in and still counting. So hopefully that's enough about me. In terms of the company, just want to mention we are a global strategy consulting firm, about 500 people worldwide, about 11, 12 offices. And we work with a range of clients, starting from companies with revenues in small tens of millions to companies in terms of revenues of tens of billions. So literally a huge kind of breadth of commercial experience. The background to this presentation is, if you kind of think about it, you'd be really hard pushed to remember a day that you haven't read or heard something about AI or analytics or robotics or anything like that. And anywhere you look, there's the company X investing this much money into it. There's a new startup that does X, Y, Z. So it's all kind of data is the new oil, and it's all rampant, if you would. Then when you kind of dig below the surface, you find that companies that invest money in analytics do tend to perform better. But also what is not known very well is really what makes those companies succeed. And when we kind of look at the companies that have kind of not got as much return as what they thought they would, the numbers are staggering. It's something like 70% of companies have not achieved what their original plan for returns in analytics was. And furthermore, we see that as well when we speak to our clients. The typical thing is, we hear all about this analytics, but actually, when we look inside the company, we really have reporting in Excel, and people kind of send Excel files by email to each other. So to try and resolve this, to try and understand this kind of dichotomy, what we've done is conducted a piece of IP. It was a survey of about 300 odd senior executives around the world, mostly UK and US. And then we followed up with about 60 structured deep dive interviews to really kind of probe the questions, and then topped up with another 50 to 100 kind of friends and family interviews, if you would. And what came out of that is, to succeed in analytics, really there is a set of things which we called imperatives, that really distinguish kind of success stories versus let's call them slightly less successful stories. if you think about them, they're really in three layers. There is a layer on foundation, and those are the table stakes. Without those, you can't really get very far. There is a set of enablers, which will make your life much easier if you are trying to create analytics kind of capability. And then there is the final one, which is somewhat ironic, talking about AI and analytics and tech, which is people. Without people, kind of none of this really works as such. So what I'm going to do in the next probably 10 minutes is talk you kind of briefly through each one of them in turn. And I have what I've called pop quizzes, but they're really case studies from experience of actual clients where the things worked and didn't. And they're purposely taken to the extremes to illustrate the points, but hopefully it will be obvious. So in terms of foundation, as I said, these are the kind of the table stakes. First one is you need senior leadership, and that senior leadership needs to show true intent. They're trying to build analytics capability for the company. And it's really about kind of having a flagpole to rally the troops around. And it needs to start all the way from the top. If it doesn't kind of live in the executive board area or the intent, it really kind of withers and doesn't go anywhere. The second one is kind of commitment, and it's slightly nuanced. There is kind of there is a bit which is around patience, i.e. you're trying to do something new, especially if you're starting from let's say beginning. It takes a while to get the results out, and the commitment, you need to be committed for the long haul, both in terms of investment and in terms of patience. Because it's not just about hire two people, give them computers and buy some software licenses and off you go. That is not going to create change. The real change comes later on once you kind of use the analytics and deploy it in the business environment. And then you have the third one, which is about relentless goal. And this may be so obvious that people will ask, why the hell are you talking about it? But that really, in other words, is about prioritization. It's understanding where in the value chain of your business, your real pivot points where analytics can transform the organizational value, where they are, and really forcing hard on those. So having those three, and that kind of helps you prioritize not to waste money, effort, and whatnot into the areas which are interesting but not value creating. Just to give you an example of that, as I said, I have kind of three pop quizzes in there. The example, two companies, company A, complex, 20 odd countries, multiple partnerships, local kind of management in charge rather than the central function. Company B, reasonably simple single geography, strong center. If you had to start your analytics kind of capability, I'm willing to bet that pretty much everyone in the room would prefer to start in company B than in company A to really create value. What actually happened is slightly different. They both started. Company A had a full commitment, CEO kind of commitment, ring-fence money for the stuff, understood where they want to deploy analytics and understood the kind of the roadmap, if you would. Whereas company B, it was more of a half-hearted effort of hiring a couple of people and who were hidden in the depths of the organization somewhere. Their company B kind of, the company works, but their analytics initiative kind of withered and never got anywhere. So it's really an example of this foundational layer, how important it is. If we now move to the kind of the enablers. The enablers, you really want to have as many of them kind of ticked off, although you don't need all of them. The kind of the enablers I'm talking about, they're the first ones that everyone's familiar with. It's about technology and data assurance. And technology is interesting in the sense that it can be both a trigger, and often is, for the kind of digital transformation, and analytics can often kind of ride in the wake of technology change. But the second, slightly more nuanced and more important bit is that without technology, you haven't got a pipe to embed analytics output into the business. So it doesn't really kind of stick in the organization. And the data assurance, again, everyone's kind of favorite topic, I suppose. The importance of that is not only do we want to have the accurate data, but it takes inaccurate data takes away from the management's attention and belief in the analytics. So having the agreed kind of outputs is really important. The bits that you kind of avoid is having a meeting where 5 executives turn up, each one of them has their own report with slightly different numbers, and out of an hour's meeting, 45 minutes is spent discussing whose data is better. Those are the first two enablers. The second enabler, the kind of the third enabler is critical mass. Importance there is it avoids subscale efforts. It gives you stability, and it can be achieved by pooling the resources from around the business into creating a central function. What we find is that in majority of the cases, there is a strong central analytical function, and you can have hub and spoke kind of a setup where you would have embedded analysts as well. But the importance is that this central hub provides resilience to the organizational change, and also helps you win the war for talent, because the analytics kind of people are far and few in between, supposedly. We'll come to that in a second. And the last one, I'm going to paraphrase the well-known kind of saying, is trying to achieve a different result by doing exactly the same is lunacy, turned into kind of analytics. Is if you have gone through the effort of building a model, not changing the process such that it can benefit from the model and from the analytics output, is not going to get you very far. He's really not. He's a waste of money, so to speak. And you see that. We see that in surveys, and you see that everywhere you talk to people. Again, similar example, 2 financial services companies, one bank, one effectively a lender, subprime lender. They went through, the enablers are kind of in white here. One of them, the bank, essentially did not follow through with the processes. They spent a lot of money with externals building the data assurance and the technology, whereas the second one really spent a lot of time and effort thinking about the processes. And in the bank's case, it broadly ended up being a souped up reporting, because they didn't build the trust of the people on the ground to use the outputs. Whereas the second one, it was basically a happy story for the management. And then the last set of this, which is the kind of the people imperatives. This is really where I guess the rubber hits the road. It's all about creating a collaborative culture and breaking down the barriers, because you have this continuous dichotomy of analytics, quantity people, really thinking of very clear deductive logic, and you have the commercial side, which is thinking much more inductively and is much more tolerant of kind of nuances and I suppose accuracy, and they tend to speak different languages to each other, or at least not understand themselves. So from the business side is kind of patience to understand what they're really trying to get across from the analytics side, and from the analysts understanding that complexity kills in reality. And the kind of the feedback and evolution, you need to be flexible as you're building analytics capability. You need to set up the internal processes to allow you to change. And what we found works really well is not only training the analysts and the business together, but actually delivering analytics projects within the business or initiatives through the joint team, not just the joint committee, if you would, but actually through the joint team. That really does work wonders. And then finally, creating the culture which is where data is part of kind of everyday's life, and moving away from from guesses and kind of thoughts of sacred cows and slashing the sacred cows and all this sort of stuff, from hypothesis to actually improving the stuff. And you see that quite strongly in the best performing companies tend to run on data more often than just pure kind of ideas. Again, on the collaborative side, just couple of examples. These are both UK-based, large retailer, large cinema chain. They both built the analytics function. In the retailer's case, the analytics was living in a silo, and they have managed to build pretty big walls around their little silo and not really collaborate tightly with the business. Whereas in the second example, they were highly collaborative in the approach. The story in the first case is somewhat sad, that broadly the whole team, after about 3 years, has kind of broken up and left the firm. And the firm wasn't too sad to see them leave either. Whereas the second one is the team has kind of got more and more input into the business beyond the initial initiatives. So that's kind of broadly the 10 imperatives as they are. There are a couple of I thought interesting observations that we came across as we did the survey. I'll run through those. The first one, and this is possibly kind of topical with all the stuff of self-service analytics, what we find works, it is really important, is you need analytics teams rather than just tools. And that is important to effectively spread tell people about the analytics and the potential to using the tools rather than just having the tools. So definitely people and tools rather than just tools. The second one, and this is the bane of my life and probably many other people's lives, is when talking about artificial intelligence, really clever methods, really clever kind of high-level accuracy, actually explainable methods, if you are so keen, it can be XAI as well, rather than just explicit kind of statistical method, win always. Because the top management, who's often not fluent in analytics, can understand it and can deliver the gut instinct to drive the business on it. That's kind of goes against the kind of the high level of accuracy, if you would. The next one is, interestingly, talent. You read about the kind of lack of analysts and data scientists in the world, and their salaries are going to go crazy because there's such a huge demand and not enough supply. What we found, that is true, but what we actually found is that people who are successful are not really just pure coders and data scientists. People who are successful in developing, deploying analytics in the businesses have a big kind of commercial role as well. So it is the famous unicorns that need to have one foot in the commercial side and 1 foot in the technical side. So that is quite important. It's not only data science technical side, but it's a commercial one as well. And finally, pilots. This kind of goes hand in hand with one of the things I talked about, which is commitment, which is pilots for really small pilots, which are, let's just see if it works, and then we're going to figure out how we do that, how we kind of implement it. Often don't run even if the pilot is positive, because they run out of steam, and you haven't shown sufficient intent before going into a small pilot. So kind of against small pilots, I am for pilots that have a commitment behind them to kind of roll it into the big things. Where does that kind of get you to is really the IP that I've talked about is we use it for diagnostic, but also for delivering, helping clients build analytics capability. And is really the kind of the temple of analytics, if you would. It's a diagnostic framework as well as the path to building a roadmap and successful analytics capability. So that's really all I wanted to do. I've shortened the talk a little bit because I think I don't want us to run over too much. So if there are any questions, please.
Yes. So I have maybe two here. You were talking there about sort of companies that are, kind of siloed, and then, companies that are relatively open. Do you see more data problems say, many more data problems at companies that are siloed versus companies that are open? Or is this sort of just or is it just problems, say across the board industry wise, with a lot more problems at more siloed companies, if that makes sense? I'm saying.
Kind of. I think it boils down to, in order to really democratize, or not necessarily democratize across the whole company, but use analytics in a commercial setup. The real issue is not technical, is the people, and you need to build the trust for those people, and that you can only do through communication. Is that answering your question? So basically,
yes, no, I totally understand, because I've worked at different enterprises, different companies that were siloed, and I don't want to name them because they're much better now, but they were heavily siloed at that moment. And in fact, I've worked at a company back maybe the early part of the last decade, and certain departments were not sharing the data.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That kind of thing. And they were using their own analytics platforms, and it wasn't, so this real uniform thing. And then they just got like this control room. And so everything has to go through this particular room. So, I just wasn't, and that's what I was just trying to figure out what your observations were.
I absolutely agree. And I mean, even internally for OCNC, what we've tried to do is we have kind of analytics consultants and general consultants. And what we've tried to do from the very beginning when we started is we wanted to make analytics not that special, if you know what I mean. So because as soon as you build the barriers between the commercial and the kind of technical side, you really have a problem. Suddenly you have silos appearing all over the place, and I don't want to share, or I'm just doing this bit because that's my bit and I don't do other bit. And the real value you bring by is mixed teams with diverse teams, in essence, in many different dimensions.
Okay. I guess the next question is this, who do you think should be, sort of responsible for, let me, before I get to that I guess this maybe kind of falls into this question. I guess the main thing here is, like, I broke into so tech during the last particular decade. I'm talking about working in it as a social media practitioner, social media manager, and then just moved on to some other things. And I noticed that the companies that I worked for, I did social media for, whether it's small or large, now have a kind of situation where they have, like, not one person doing it or two or three. They have a number of people doing it. It's not necessarily like a company-wide thing, but they have that's what they have. So I guess my question is, who should be, who should be responsible for, the whole analytic structure of a company? Now, I know that companies are different. A company that may have 500 may be different than, say, a company that might have 5,000. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But there is this approach, if you will, to social media, and they're just kind of wondering if that kind of representative approach, maybe say one department can post it, or in social media this week, and one person is posting social media that week. Is that the kind of approach that you foresee or could see with analytics?
So one of the things that we do come across quite often is that different kind of units will have their own one or two people who are kind of doing the analytics. And what you end up in these situations, you end up with no real joint approach. Sometimes that's kind of okay, because one is looking at the supply chain, the other one is looking at like store performance, the third one is looking at e-com, and the fourth one is doing something else, whatever it may be, right? If you take that apart a little bit, although the point where they're applying things may be slightly different. Actually, the techniques they're using and the toolkit often, not always, but often is very similar. And there's quite a lot of value in exchanging their views and their experience and coming up with a better kind of outcome. So our preference is centralized with a hub and spoke setup, where you have the center that kind of ensures that there is a standard, there is a certain level within the company, and you may have some specialism that is kind of locally deployed or sits in the unit itself.
Right.
So that's kind of been the finding of our IP, but also from the clients when we look at the people who are totally distributed versus people who are more kind of aggregated towards the center. The more successful ones tend to have a central bit.
And I guess real quick, do you think, I guess that maybe because I know definitely that I mean, because your practice, you go in and you talk about analytics and so forth, consult on that. God, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I was just trying to figure out like if a company came to you and said, how can we get just more of our folks, sort of educated in this, if you will. So, because again, it's kind of maybe as a back doorway to my last question related to that, because you said something in your presentation about how it's not a situation where you have to be a coder, you have to be, data scientist, and that very few people with, the analytical who are involved in analytics are sort of few and far between. I guess that's kind of what you're getting at, like in these companies.
Yeah.
So, what is the one thing, or maybe just a number of things real quick, and I guess this will be my last question, that a company can do to not necessarily, nudge people, but to say, hey, listen, we're going to get more of us involved in this to make this, relatively a more, company-wide thing. Again, it's going to be central. Maybe let's say a company may say it's still going to be central where we're going to have a team, but we're still going to have everybody involved in the analytical structure to ensure quality data, if you will.
Absolutely. Because I'm not even for a second suggesting that I'm going to take someone who's kind of done from a non-technical background, that we're going to make them a chief statistician for a company. That's
right. Exactly.
It's not going to work. Yeah. However, it's again coming back to this issue of trust, is about breaking down the barriers between them. And many people, and we found that even in our own firm, we have kind of extended team where we have seminars and kind of trainings and stuff where people want to get involved in ever so small kind of efforts, small steps, in order to learn something about this hot area. It is hot, and possibly trying to do a little bit. And you have the vice versa, which is for analysts, is critical that they appreciate the business side as well. So it's about education, communication, trust building.
Got it. Okay. Well, I really appreciate your insight today on analytics. Like I said, you can't go wrong. On this particular topic. There's always going to be a need for better, better data, and certainly better techniques to harness that data. So I really appreciate this. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.